Hi, welcome. I'm Maggie Whitehouse, and with me is Peter Bolland. And I've asked Peter to join me today because I need his help. Peter, would you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'd be happy to. So good to see you, my friend. First of all, it's a delight to be here. I am a professor of philosophy and humanities at a community college here in Southern California called Southwestern College, where I've been teaching mostly world religions, world mythology, Asian philosophy for 34 years now. And I have a book and I do Substack and I talk all over town and I do a lot of things around a lot of these pieces, same as you, Maggie. And I'm such a fan of your amazing books and your stand-up and everything else you do and this incredible work you do with all of the world's mystical traditions. I feel like I'm part of your team and that this strange affiliation across all borders of all of us wayward mystic types who are attracted to religion and often act from within a tradition or another, but feel, I think, a little more comfortable on the road. And that is so it's been wonderful to dialogue with you now all these many years. So I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Of course, you being American are just so beautifully flowy and complimentary, whereas we Brits will just go, well, this is cool. Right, I'm a Kabbalist. I have studied and taught Toledano tradition Kabbalah for decades now. I got into this because when my first husband died, the hospital chaplain told me that he was going to hell because he wasn't a Christian. And up until that point, I'd been what you call an armchair Christian, along the lines of St. Augustine, as in God grant me chastity, constancy, and patience, but not yet. And that sort of went out of the window. So I became very interested in Judaic mysticism because I wanted to know the background to Jesus. I wanted to know what was underneath the Gospels. I wanted to know how to read this weird book called the Bible. And I went down the line of New Age and healing and all that kind of stuff, but always came back to say, I got to get to the root of my problem. And the root of my problem is Christianity. And frankly, right now, the root of a lot of the world's problems are Christianity, or the right-wing view of Christian nationalism, of this idea that we have a God who is a white old man. And that one has got to be put to bed and put to death, actually, because we're not going to go on into a future where Christianity will have any honor or any credence whatsoever if we keep down the path that we're going. Now, Kabbalah taught me, there's two forms of Kabbalah, by the way. The one that I follow is the one which believes in original blessing, which is that when God created the universe, everything was good. And the only evil comes from the misuse of human free will. Earthquakes aren't human, aren't evil. They are a planet sneezing. What we do about earthquakes is whether it's good or evil. The second form of Kabbalah, which is the one that most people know, Lurianic Kabbalah, talks of God making a mistake during creation,
Mm.
which brought an external evil into the world. That one got up and started running because it was developed at about the time the printing press turned up. And of course, it fitted very well with the Christian concept of the devil, this idea of an external evil. But I'm very much an original blessing kind of person, which is it is our job to update and to move things on. And I'm working a lot from this book called The Zohar, which is the seminal Kabbalistic text, which is hideously out of date, hideously what we would call Hodian, which is it goes on into the intellect rather than the heart, but it's still got magic in it.
Mm.
And my goal with begging you to come and talk to me, and I'm so glad you want to, is I'm writing a book right now which is called What If? Reimagining Christianity for a post-MAGA age. And what I need to do is have help in reconnecting the original dots in a different way so we have a way to move forward. And how I want to do that is to get very deeply into the feminine. I'm not talking feminist anger. I'm talking feminine. So you are my go-to expert on all the myths and legends of creation. So could you start off by talking with me a little bit about how we are meant to read these sacred texts? Because literal is not the answer, is it?
No, it isn't. And I'm just this last week finishing up my first week here at Southwestern College, and I have a couple of sections, as I always do, of world mythology. And job number one, before we read any myths or get into any of that stuff, is this question. The difference between reading text literally and metaphorically. And I know to folks like you and I who have been in this life for decades, that seems like a rather elementary distinction that and a discernment we've practiced forever. But to a lot of young students coming into my classes, beginning college students, this is rather a revelation. This idea that one can read texts in layers, that there are layers of meaning. And a touchstone for me is Joseph Campbell's work, and I assigned the first half of his first book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, to this batch of students. And toward in the second half of the book, he just pretty much lays it out that if you're reading myths literally, you are not only missing the meaning, you're actually destroying the story. That the purpose of myth, and he expands it to include all religions, that myths and religions are the penultimate, not the ultimate stage. And mythic narratives and rituals and religious community and these stories on the page or in film or whatever media are designed to get us to the second to the last stage. And then he says, and then it is left for us alone to leap and to leap into the unity, into the unification, which has nothing to do with conceptual thought or language or this particular symbol or that particular concept. And so that's the real value and purpose of mythology, then, according to him, that all mythology and religion are essentially community art forms that ready us for what is essentially an ineffable experience. And so, to that extent, myth and mythic image has essential and tremendous power. But it is also true that staying with literal interpretations of those stories has tremendous destructive power.
Yeah. Indeed, yes. In Kabbalah, we're taught about four levels of reading the Bible or any of these texts.
Yeah.
And the diagram behind me, you can just about see it has four different colors. There's the divine level, the spiritual level, the psychological level, and the physical or literal level. And the literal level is the least important. The psychological is the analogy. What is
Yeah.
this story about? What's the story telling us? And for us, the third level, the metaphysical, is what does this story mean to me? Is this making me really angry? Is this making me feel complacent? Is this making me feel virtuous? How is this affecting me? And we're taught also that the ones that really make you angry are the ones you've got to examine because they're showing your own inner projections.
Mhm.
And the final one is the mystical one, which is what does this say about the development of creation, the spiritual evolution of humanity and the planet? And that's the one where you're jumping off into the absolute magical and what is the great meaning of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So the other image that I shared in my world religions classes yesterday, I said, let's talk about God. On day two of the semester, what is God? And I asked them to write a few minutes. That's always a good way to get a discussion going. Kind of me stop talking. Everybody just write for 5 minutes. What is God? And where do our ideas of God come from? And then you just go around the room and ask for volunteers, and this incredible discuss. I never know what's going to happen, but just just this the cream starts to rise. It's just mind blowing, and there are so many different perspectives. You know, I teach in the very southwestern corner of the United States. My campus is 8 miles from the border of Mexico. My community is 80% Latino or Hispanic, a community which is 80% Roman Catholic. But a lot of 19 to 24-year-olds, you know, they're not going to mass, and Catholicism is their culture, but not maybe their passion. So there's a whole range of experiences there. And so it was after that discussion about God ideas, then I closed out the session with another Joseph Campbell idea of God concepts as he calls them the masks of eternity. And it's a nice metaphor because it our God idea is an idea that came to us from our culture. They're almost always all secondhand.
Mm.
And who creates these God concepts or these masks? Artists and and writers of old. And so a patriarchal culture has a male god, and a matrilineal, matrifocal, matriarchal culture has the great goddess. And we sort of take our own sociological assumptions and project them. And all God concepts, therefore, according to Campbell, are human created
Constructs.
and most of the time perhaps with the best of intentions to try to literally hang a face on formlessness so that we can, and it's very human impulse, isn't it? So that we have someone to look at and talk to and have a relationship and connection to. But Campbell, of course, just like the last idea we were thinking about, argues that in the end, your God idea is not God. And and we forget that we made the mask, and we begin to think that our mask or our concept of God is God, as you just were sharing as well. So, one way to put it would be to say that if you want to know God, you have to forget everything you know about God,
Yes.
which is a very kind of mystical thing to do, right? The cloud of unknowing and all that stuff.
Sure.
But for students who just stumbled into my classroom in the first week, that might sound sort of radically seditious. But I tell you
Definitely it
what,
would,
people are
yeah.
people are kind of nodding. They're kind of going, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. The Christianity aspect of God face to face is really interesting because the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah says that the diagram behind me and the other one behind me are representations of all the patterns of the universe, or if you like, the 10 faces of God, because there are 10 names for God in the Hebrew Testament. But the idea is that you're looking at the back of God, so you're walking with God. It's not that God's turned his back on you, it's that you're walking together, like Noah walked with God and Enoch walked with God.
Mhm.
But for most of us, we want that face. We want those faces of the God we can relate to. So when Christianity came along, Christian Kabbalists turned the tree around so that it's looking at you like a mirror. So you're looking at the face of Christ, if you like. Both of them will work. I prefer the walking with God part because I want to be open to all the faces of the Holy One rather than just this one face.
No, that's beautiful. And I'm thinking of the Indian tradition here and how in Hinduism there are these four main margas or paths.
Mhm.
And again, Campbell, I guess I never shut up about Campbell, but
I
you
don't
know,
either.
yeah, he talks about religion coming sort of there's the folk religion level, and the Sanskrit word for that is desi, D-E-S-I. And that's people who believe that their gods are literally real.
Yeah.
And they offer it's a very material kind of religiosity. You lay an offering on the altar because you're trying to make your sick kid get well, or the crops next year,
Mhm.
or the prosperity of my family. And so it's very for many people in religion, we just have to recognize this. Their gods are literal.
Yeah.
It's all real. The virgin birth and all that is literally true, jumping out of Christianity. All
Yeah.
the miracles are factual events that actually happened as described. And we have a transactional relationship with
Mhm.
that divinity. If we make the right propitiations and offerings, then we get what we need. Now, that's the folk religion level,
Yeah.
but there's always this other level in his bifurcation. And there's probably more than two, but and the second level is the one of walking with God in the language you were just sharing, where one is not, performing according to propriety in order to receive benefit, but one is moving to let the God concepts pull you deeper and deeper and deeper into what is fundamentally a unity kind of experience.
Yes, transformative, not transactional.
Yeah.
But that is a later step. Well, Joseph Campbell really obviously inspired me probably almost as much as you. But what fascinated me at the beginning of the work that I'm doing about, I want to do Kabbalah and ecology and the feminine, and the two are really very much involved together, ecology and the feminine, I
Mm.
think. And Campbell talked of the four levels of creation myths. I mean, there's wonderful creation myths, though they have patterns. And when we started off, of course, we really started all this stuff with observation because we were sitting around our campfire at night. We didn't have novels or Netflix or anything like that. So we would talk and we would sing and we would observe the skies and we would just observe patterns. And of course, once we started thinking about creation, once we started poking the sky with a stick, as it were, I just love that analogy that we would
Yeah.
be, what's up there? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
just climbed a tree and poked it from up there, and then got on a mountain and poked it from up there to see what happened. The first thing was we believed that creation came from the woman. Women gave birth.
Hmm.
So we had parthenogenesis
Yeah.
religions, which the Sky Mother, which is in American indigenous culture in a big way. And the
Yes.
idea was the Sky Mother gave birth to the whole of creation. And then the second level of the belief that came, and this is about 3,000 years before Jesus, was the idea that the Sky Mother mated with a god. So they realized that male and female came together. But
Mm.
then they moved on, and after the Babylonian exile at the end of the First Temple, which I'm going to witter on at you about in further meetings if we go on about it.
Yes.
When the First Temple was ended, they were inspired or lowered, perhaps, by the legend in Babylon, which is where the enslaved Jewish folk were taken, the Hebrews were taken, of Marduk and Tiamat, where Marduk, the male god, kills Tiamat, the goddess of chaos, and creates the universe from her dead body.
His grandmother, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, right, fair enough.
It's
Well,
a
he was.
family massacre.
Yeah, you know more about this than I do. Also, I'm a journalist, everybody, so I will do the common ground version, whereas Peter can be the expert, which is great.
Oh no.
But we need both. And then finally, we get this patriarchal idea of all of creation coming from a male god alone. And
Yeah.
that's the root of the patriarchal supremacy.
It's a really useful typology to go through those stages. Back to Marduk and Tiamat for a moment, and then on to the larger point. But it's that's a good example in the Sumerian creation myth of a common archetype in that period
Mm,
of these polytheistic systems with these cosmic families and intergenerational warfare. Now,
mm,
I don't know what that means or what that's about, but the younger folks are always like literally going to war with their parents and grandparents. And it gets in the Sumerian version profoundly, horrifically bloody. And Tiamat's body is split apart
mm,
and it becomes the universe. And so there are vestiges of this, the cosmos being a feminine thing, but male violence was an instrumental cause of that in that particular story. Now, I
mm,
don't need to get caught in all the weeds here. We're probably because that gets us more into what the values of a particular culture are than
mm,
in the general questions that we're really chasing today. So I think that's so interesting the way you laid it out, that in the earliest records that we can find, that parthenogenesis idea of creation emerging from the feminine, and that's that period of the great mother goddess and the earth and being that presence. So creation comes from from form, from the material form.
Mm.
And it's almost a kind of non-dualistic way, and the male is not really even considered in that. And then we get to these family stages, and then we get to the end where Campbell calls the first stage, I think, the way of the sacred earth. And there's very little male participation. And then the second one is the way of man, and specifically in the Jesus myth and the Jesus story, where a patriarchal God in the form of the Holy Spirit brings the seed to Mary, who is essentially passive in the process. She's not the source of it, she's the vessel of it. And it's all conceived, in this case, literally, it's all imagined, it's all planned, it's all orchestrated by a male energy. So creation is fundamentally now being co-opted by masculine patriarchal energy in the Christian story. And that is a far cry. And then there's a third stage he calls the way of the celestial lights. And now creation is coming from completely extraterrestrial, disembodied, I know not what, which, by the way, is still characterized as a masculine energy. And so, feminine creative power has not only been co-opted, it's been extremely marginalized,
Mm.
and the role of as the story of Mary goes, she is really powerless in this, and she is simply a vessel in which male activities take place.
I'm
What a
going to
change, huh?
contradict that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. We
but
should, I hope so.
actually, this is what we've been taught. But in
Yeah,
the Bible, you can connect those dots completely differently. And that's
I
what I'm
hope so.
trying to do. Because in, I think, Song of Solomon, there's the part where Solomon was crowned by his mother, Bathsheba.
Yeah,
And Mary is the one who tells Jesus to start his teaching, to start the miracles at the wedding at Cana. So if you actually read this in as a first temple Hebrew rather than a second temple Hebrew, because the first temple honored the divine feminine equally with the divine masculine, you're actually going to start look at the same dots with a slightly different aspect. When you talk about Mary meeting Elizabeth when Mary is pregnant and Elizabeth is pregnant with John the Baptist, you can read that as two women saying, "Oh, God isn't God wonderful in impregnating us?" Or you can actually
right.
read it as two women discussing the overflow of an empire.
Hmm.
You can actually start to look at these things in a different way. And what I'm doing with the book is I'm starting off with the chapter one event Genesis, because most people talk about God being male. And if you say to them, what is the name of God? They'll go Yahweh, Yod He Vav He, the tetragrammaton, which we pronounce Yahweh, and the Hebrew people actually don't pronounce at all. They'll just say Adonai, as in Lord. But
Yes.
that's the critical point for me in reimagining what we need to do perhaps with Christianity, or what I intend to try and do, which is that the whole of the first chapter of Genesis has nothing to do with Yahweh at all. He's not there. The universe is created by Elohim, a feminine plural noun.
Yeah.
So, Mother Goddess, or goddesses, this family, if you like, created the universe. Yahweh turns up at chapter 2 pretty much as the son of Elohim, only shows up with the creation of humanity. And
Now, can
Elohim,
I
yes,
can I
yes,
ask you a
go.
question here? Maybe you can illuminate this for
Hmm.
me, because in my understanding, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not in chronological order in terms of their composition. I've seen
Go for it.
uh,
Great.
the argument that Genesis 1, which as you just
Mm.
well described, um, is the more recent text that was written maybe around 500, like maybe around the time of the Babylonian exile or
Mm.
afterwards.
Mm.
And Genesis 2, which goes back to the beginning of creation, it's a very different
Yeah,
story, right? That God makes Adam first, not man and woman. He made them at the same time.
yeah,
Suddenly in Genesis 2, we have Adam alone
yeah,
and no animals that have even been made yet. Then he makes
yeah.
all the animals to see if they're suitable helpers. None of them are suitable helpers. takes a bone and makes a woman, blah blah blah. And then you get the apple, or sorry, the
Yeah.
fruit and the garden and the expulsion, all that jazz. That's in 2 and 3. So
Yeah.
Genesis 1 is this curious later, I guess I could say, or more recent account that gets by the editors of Genesis gets put in the front. So what's your sense then? So we're not talking chronologically about a
With
evolving God concept. There's competing God concepts.
Yeah, what the Kabbalist would say, or the Kabbalist in me would say, is that
Yeah,
Elohim creates the universe. Yahweh Elohim forms the universe.
sure.
The creation is the concept.
Hmm.
So Yahweh is actually the aspect of the divine that comes in and says, we will divide. We will have male
Yeah,
and female. We will have horse and dog. We will have cow and sheep. We will have tree and plant. So it's the
yeah.
actual formation. So in Kabbalah, it's different levels of bringing stuff down. It's like you and I have Peter has a wonderful book called The Seven Stone Path, which is 101 philosophy. It's terrific. I'm far more specialist, so your books are more popular than mine. But that
I
I won't
don't
hate
think
you.
that's
I
true.
won't hate you.
How could you know that?
Actually, I don't. I don't know that, but it is an excellent book, and I do
I've
recommend
sold
it.
hundreds of books.
Ah. Actually, on a diversion, my first book sold 70,000 and was not
See,
deemed enough for a follow-up. But my latest
good
Kabbalah
Lord.
book, no, latest book one sold 6,500 and got on the New York Times bestseller list. That's
Yeah.
how many books are published now.
I know it is really
It
low.
is, isn't it?
I just looked at my author dashboard. I think I'm up to 2,300. My book is 2 years old, and here is what the cover looks like, everybody. Oh, my Zoom is set, so everything's blurry. I don't know how to fix that. My book's been banned in England, apparently. It's all blurry. But no, thank you for writing an endorsement of it, by the way. But
You're
yeah,
very, very welcome. Thank you for
Bolland.com if you
endorsing
want
me.
to.
We are deeply entwined in each other's admiration.
I
But
love it. Indeed.
so we've got all this mash and mesh and mosh and mish at the beginning of Genesis. But what I really want to bring into it is even though it is a mismatch of different writings brought together, and again, it's all these four different writers of the Hebrew Testament: the Yahwist text, the Elohist text, the Deuteronomical text, and the priestly text. Yahwist is the Lord. Elohim is God. So when you read the Old Testament, the Hebrew Testament, whenever it says God, it says Elohim. Whenever it says Lord, it says Yahweh. And it's really important to have a look at these because we've got texts that are melded and they're working at slightly different levels. And once you can see that, you start going, okay, let's get more into the allegory. Let's get more into the metaphysics. Let's get more into what this means for me. And it's very fair to say that the first temple, which honored the divine feminine, did go corrupt. All religions corrupt. Because once the initial impulse, the great spiritual impulse of the great leader who's got the truth for that time, once they've gone, it's the ones, people who run things that take it up. It's the animal people. It's the people who are going to say, well, we need 17 people here and we need to raise that much money there. And you've got to follow that rule here and you've got to follow that rule there. And pretty soon we lose the essence in the law. And there's this wonderful phrase, which is that Jesus interpreted the law through love, whereas religion interprets love through the law. And those two are very different.
Fascinating. Yeah, and you see Paul, the Pharisaic Jew, in his surviving letters, and just over half of them pretty indisputably authentic, and then the other third or 2/5 of them kind of, we wonder. But anyway, there's enough there, isn't there, to go on that he is wrestling with his own evolution from Pharisaic Judaism to coming into the Jesus movement, and the guy just won't stop talking about the law and faith and the sort of the conflict between these two things, and yet still it seems to me passionately trying to synthesize or turn it not into not stop with the either or but go to the both and and that's a noble impulse in those kinds of times.
It is a noble impulse, and of course, he's been misinterpreted and he's been taken out of his social times
Yeah.
because he was a Roman citizen. And he even Paul, he blamed other people. He did terrible emotional blackmail about money to some of these people. And I'm quite sure that if you got hold of him now and said, "All your letters are now pretty much gospel," he'd go, "No,
I was having a bad Monday, yeah, when I wrote that.
yes."
I know. Imagine, some grumpy Facebook rant becoming, immortalized for all time. Good
Yeah,
Lord.
but of course, what we do is we go with the sins of the flesh, and Paul's quite good on the sins of the flesh. We're going
Yeah,
off on a different problem now, but all the sins
sure.
of the flesh are defined by the system. And the
Yeah,
system can be the religion, or it can just be the social mores of the time. But what we tend to do, and what we're seeing MAGA particularly doing, and people in fundamentalist faiths all over the world,
yeah.
is going literally on this is the law, this is how it is, you do not break it, or you go to hell. And it's just
Right.
such a loss of everything that is important in this faith.
Absolutely. And of, here in the US, a particular crisis uh, has at its heart Christian nationalism, which we've mentioned now before, but this not only is religion shaped by empire, there is a deeply organized, well-funded, and concerted effort to absolutely unify this particular brand, this aberrant brand of Christianity with empire, and utterly conflate the two in to any thoughtful person in complete violation of the essential core values of the
Yeah.
teachings of Jesus, or what we used to call Christianity anyway. And
Yeah.
that's been a problem for a lot of centuries, but it's really coming to a head now when the executioner and the priest and the emperor become partners.
Yeah, or just one person. Well,
Right.
one government, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also, it's interesting this projection of how you project your own shadow onto other people. America uh,
yeah,
was seriously anti-Islam after 9/11
yeah.
and projected all the anger on the Taliban and their treatment of women and education and all the things. And guess what? You
Guess
become
what?
what you hate.
I think more and more there's this phrase that comes to mind, and every, especially in the era of the current president here, Donald Trump, that every accusation is a confession.
Yes.
And that's the insidious way in this Jungian analysis of how the shadow becomes projected onto the other. So all of a sudden, all of Trump's enemies are very, very, very corrupt. And it's just
Mm.
hilarious because
Mm.
I don't even need to say it, right? So it
Yep.
just it just goes on and on and on. All of this, the QAnon movement, all about protecting children and rooting out pedophiles. And then it turns out that the people crowing the loudest about that are the most dangerous pedophiles among us. And it's like,
Mm.
who didn't see that coming?
Yeah.
So these are the times we live in. Those throwing the first stone, to go back to John,
Yeah. Yeah.
famous parable, whoever is without sin, throw the first stone. And this is the reason why that's pretty sound policy,
Yeah.
because when you're hurling these accusations around, it's terribly inaccurate and untrustworthy information. And again, except insofar as it reveals, now we kind of know about your shadow.
Yes. But I think what is at the heart of all of this is a discounting of the feminine. I'm not talking women, I'm talking the feminine in masculine and women, because we both have those. And I will also say quite clearly and loudly that women are as bad as any man ever in suppressing the feminine.
Oh,
That
sure.
we conspire with the white patriarchy because that's how we get our power. But there has to be some point of turnaround. That's why the What If book is bubbling inside me, because I'm
Beautiful.
reading the Zohar at the moment, and I just see again and again this line here on page 421. The female is fed by the male because she has nothing of her own. And
Strange.
the thing about the female, the feminine, not the female, is it is at home and comfortable with darkness and chaos. It
Hmm.
can live with the shadow and it can transform it. And the Zohar says pretty clearly that the masculine is the shell around the feminine that needs to keep it under control. So this is what you kind of see, isn't it? Because the witch hunts and all of both men and women and witch hunts of anybody who does not conform to the law is this chaos seen to be trying to break through the shell, which must be controlled. And I think what we probably have to work with is this idea of demonizing the darkness. Because
Hmm.
we as human beings have created light since the Industrial Revolution. And this planet works naturally on 50% light, 50% darkness.
Yeah.
We go round with the seasons. We have lighter summers in the northern and southern hemisphere, apart from on the equator when it's all pretty much the same. And then we have darker winters, and it works out in balance. We invented electric light, and that's fine. Uh, it was a little bit more light, but now, of course, we have screens and the internet, and we are always seeking light, 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 light. And the light is in the mystical text is the controlling aspect that
Mm.
denies the dark.
There's a whole chapter right there. That's good.
Isn't there? Yeah.
I
So
love
we
this.
have too much light, and too much of anything goes bad,
Yes.
says the
That
woman
is,
talking to a man on a screen.
well, we use the tools we find at the ends of our hands. It's not our fault, but but that is really interesting that it's such a to put it in a sort of cliche form that we have to strike a balance and that yin and yang symbol in Taoism and that if you go too far in one direction, you end up back in the other. And if I don't want to hear about the dark, let's just light, 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 light. Well, then you end up with a new kind of pathology. I'm interested in that idea. If the light is about control and order and protection and so on, what is the dark about?
The dark is about letting go.
Yeah,
The dark is letting go and letting God.
yeah,
That is the purity of the dark. It's about saying, I don't know. I may be wrong. Over to you.
right. Surrender.
Surrender. Yeah. Yeah. But not surrender as in, oh God, don't beat me, don't beat me, don't beat me.
No,
See how we get
right.
these so mixed up
I
that the
know
word
language.
surrender finds it, people find it very, very difficult. As you know, I had a stage 4 cancer some while ago, and it was supposedly an incurable one. And there was a point, I know that the turning point, there were two turning points. One was to take a pilgrimage, and the other was complete letting go,
Yeah.
complete letting go, and being totally satisfied with a life that meant all I could do was sit on the sofa wrapped in a blanket and watch the birds on the bird feeder. That's all I could do, and letting go and really finding the joy in that, in the not controlling my life.
Hmm. In Taoism, there's a phrase Wu Wei,
Mm,
and it means literally not doing. And another way to translate it would be creative letting be. So it's a fundamental relationship with everything around you that is uh, present, creative, cooperative, but in no way controlling.
mm,
And we find this idea in Stoicism and Buddhist non-attachment and in the drug and alcohol recovery programs. And it's chapter 2 in my book is on surrender. The first chapter is on acceptance, and so and both of those chapters have a lot to do with Buddhism and Stoicism. And this now we're connecting to this idea of the power of darkness or the power of indeterminacy, the power of emptiness and space
Mm,
and where what I want and what my ego plans have no power and no place
mm,
except to interfere and sow more chaos. And so
yeah.
um, that famous story about Gandhi, who was somebody stuck a mic in his face, a reporter, and said, "Give us your philosophy of life in 3 words." And he said, "Renounce and enjoy." I don't know. He was ready for the question. I don't know if I
Mm,
can do it. And later he talked about how that was his 3 word summary of the Isha Upanishad, and it's such a big idea in Advaita Vedanta, renunciation. And across Hinduism, that takes many forms. Formally, the renunciant or the sannyasin is in the last stages of one's life, one changes one's name and walks away from family and walks away from career and reputation and just meditates on the side of the river for the
yeah.
rest of their life. And so that now is there, we don't all have to throw it all off and go
No,
meditate.
no, we just want some balance because we
But
haven't got that now. There's so many people now falling asleep with their television on in their bedroom. They have their mobile phone on by the bed, so they've got the Wi-Fi coming through, which is a form of light because it's electricity. Can you see?
yeah,
It's just about pulling back a little bit, and just honoring that silence, which of course we're now trained to believe is boring.
renunciation for us householders who aren't monastics in the woods
Yep.
is a different kind of thing. I don't know if you're still doing it, but I remember you were doing a tech Sabbath, for a day or two on the
Yeah.
weekend and just
Oh, I do.
unplugging.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And just to have those conscious moments, just to and everybody can carve their own path here, but just to say, I'm not going to eat in front of the TV anymore. And at least when we have meals, let's turn off all the machines and chew our food. And if we're
Yeah.
not talking, we'll just be quiet,
Yeah.
and so anyway, there are many ways to let go, and one of them is to enter into one's work, one's writing, or whatever you do, working at the bank or anything else. I have a crew out here at my house. At the moment, you may hear an occasional drill or jackhammer, but there's a whole troop of guys in the backyard because our pool was falling apart, crumbling, and so we drained it. And there's been this whole team of guys here for weeks, rebuilding it. And there's a mason back there putting rectangular stones on a curved pool, and he's carefully measuring each one. And I want to videotape this guy because it's like the perfect picture of presence, of mindfulness, of craftsmanship. But he's very relaxed, and he's clearly enjoying the hell out of himself.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of, we lose ourselves in our work, and he's just sort of let go of everything else.
Yeah.
And that enables him just to be so creative, and he's making this thing of beauty that he really enjoys, and he has skills many others do not have. And so, it's fascinating to me. Here I am, this professor guy who works at my desk all the time, and this guy's showing me how to live my life.
Yeah. Well, the Kabbalistic teaching is that you receive from the Holy One so you can give it on. So you've got to create that space. That guy had to learn how to do that and create the space and allow it to come. For a writer, it's the muse. You have to show up for the muse.
Absolutely. You can't wait.
You have to have the discipline. That's another thing of the feminine, which is discipline.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Kabbalah, Gevura is the ultimate no, and it's on the left-hand side of the tree, which is represented by the darkness and the feminine. And it's the power of no.
No meaning no to this so I
Yeah,
can do this.
yeah.
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
meaning
Chuck
just.
Close, there's a visual artist, contemporary artist, famous quote about inspiration. He says, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work."
Yeah,
And I find that helpful whether I'm trying to record a song or write a Substack or build a lecture for a class or
yeah,
whatever the heck it is, to just, I'm not going to sit there and go, well, I'll only start when I'm drunk with inspiration.
yeah.
No,
No.
that's ineffective, and frankly, it kind of disrespects the process, I think.
And it's paralyzed.
To act like creation is some impulse that comes from outside of you.
Yeah. You really have to show up. I always say to people when they ask, how do you start writing a book? I say, forget the first paragraph, just write the story. You can come back and do a smart first paragraph when you've written the
Right.
story.
Start in the middle.
Yeah, start in the middle, start in the middle. Okay, I think probably we've talked enough, but I've learnt a lot already. Thank you, Peter.
Me too.
This is
What a
great.
joy.
May we continue to do it and do it again.
Please, as frequently or infrequently as you like. This is easy and wonderful and fun, and I miss you. And I hope all the best to Lion and everybody else in your life and the beautiful part of the world that you live. And one last question for you, and it might be a British English, American English thing. I hear folks here stateside saying Kabbalah, the accent on the first syllable,
Mhm.
and I think I'm hearing you say Kabbalah.
Yeah,
And I know neither of us are saying it in the way it might be said in Portuguese
no.
or Hebrew or whatever, but help me out there. What are some of the choices that we can make?
Well, it's Kabbalah or Kabbalah. And I don't really think it matters. I think that's one of
Okay, then.
those things where
Both are
you can,
acceptable.
how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin?
Well, it's
Who's
ego,
like,
isn't it? We all want to appear smart, and I don't want to sit
yes.
wrong and be foolish, you know?
Oh, yes. Well,
That's
I was
part of it.
a radio presenter and I'd only ever read the word fugitive. I'd never heard it pronounced. So I'm reading
Uh-oh.
the news and I say fugitive and I'm in terrible trouble. But everybody knew what I
The
meant.
BBC will not have that. Yeah. Yeah,
No.
I had the same problem with the word epitome, which I since learned
Oh,
is
the
pronounced
epitome.
epitome.
Yes.
But you're a kid coming up reading books. You're like, I never heard
Yeah.
anybody say this word.
No, I think it's a
That's
great
spot on.
idea. You at least you know the word. My mother used to say you've got the emphasis on the wrong syllable, dear.
There it is. Wonderful. Well, I love
Lovely.
learning with you and laughing with you. So let's do it again soon, Maggie. All right?
And laughing, that's a good title for a podcast, isn't it?
Indeed.
Bless you, Peter. We'll
Bye,
talk
everybody.
again soon, and I'm very grateful. Take care.
Thank you.